The alarm echoed through the massive council chamber. Ji-hoon pressed his hand against the cold glass window and stared at the holographic display floating before him. Another system had fallen. That made 12 in just 3 months. How many survivors? He asked quietly. The officer behind him checked her data pad. Her name was Hana, and she had been tracking the Vorthak swarm's movements for 2 years now. None, they consumed everything. The planets are empty shells now. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. He had served the Galactic Council for 40 years. In all that time, he had never seen anything like this. The Vorthak came from beyond the Outer Rim, appearing without warning 5 years ago. At first, they seemed like a minor problem. A few border raids, some missing ships. The Council sent military forces to investigate. Those forces never returned. The Vorthak were not like other species. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply consumed. Worlds, ships, stations, everything became food for their endless reproduction. The swarm grew larger with every victory. Hana moved to stand beside Ji-hoon. The defense fleet at Karos Prime is requesting reinforcements. They estimate the swarm will reach them in 6 days. We don't have reinforcements to send, Ji-hoon said. His voice sounded tired even to his own ears. Across the galaxy, 17 species had already gone extinct. Entire civilizations erased in weeks. The Council had tried everything. Energy weapons that could crack planets in half barely slowed the swarm. Biological weapons that should have killed anything living had no effect. The Vorthak adapted to every attack, evolved past every defense. Ji-hoon walked toward the Council chamber's main hall. Hundreds of representatives from dozens of species filled the tiered seats. They were arguing, as always. Some wanted to flee to another galaxy. Others demanded more weapons research. A few insisted on attempting diplomatic contact, despite all evidence that the Vorthak had no interest in talking. Doyen stood at the central podium. He was old even by his species standards, with gray skin and tired eyes. But his mind remained sharp. He had been the Council's chief strategist for over a century. The situation is clear, Doyen said, his voice cutting through the arguments. We are losing. Every battle costs us ships and soldiers we cannot replace. The swarm grows stronger while we grow weaker. At this rate, the Outer Rim will fall within 2 years. The inner colonies will follow within 5. Then what do you suggest? Someone shouted from the upper seats. Doyen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his words were careful and measured. There is one option we have not considered. Protocol Omega. The chamber fell silent. Ji-hoon felt his heartbeat faster. Protocol Omega. He had heard rumors about it, but always assumed it was just a legend. A ghost story the older species told to frighten their young. Minseo stood from her seat near the front. She was the Council's ambassador to the restricted worlds. Though most of those worlds were empty now, you cannot be serious. Protocol Omega was sealed for good reason. I am completely serious, Doyen replied. We sealed away humanity 2,000 years ago because they were too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. But those same qualities make them the only force that might stop the Vorthak. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted at each other. Some species had never even heard of humans. Others remembered the old stories all too well. Ji-hoon had studied the history files. Before the Great Pacification Wars, humans had been a rising power. They conquered their home system in less than a century. When they discovered faster-than-light travel, they exploded across the stars. Human colonies appeared everywhere, growing faster than anyone predicted. Then came the wars. Humans fought each other first in conflicts so brutal that entire planets burned. When they finally united, they turned their attention outward. Every species that opposed them learned the same lesson. Humans did not accept defeat. They did not surrender. They found ways to win that no one else would consider. The Council had been forced to act. They offered humanity a choice: submit to galactic law and accept limitations on their expansion, or face the combined might of 50 allied species. The humans chose war. It lasted 30 years. Billions died on both sides. In the end, the Council won through sheer numbers and superior technology. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The Council's leaders decided that humanity was too dangerous to allow in civilized space. They were given one final option: permanent stasis on isolated sanctuary worlds, or complete extermination. The humans chose stasis. Now Doyen was suggesting they be awakened. They were monsters, Minseo said firmly. They turned warfare into a science. They never followed the accepted rules of engagement. They used weapons we had banned for centuries. They won battles they should have lost, Doyun interrupted. They adapted to every situation. They created solutions no one else imagined. Yes, they were violent. Yes, they were dangerous. But they were also effective. Hana leaned close to Ji-hoon and whispered, "Do you think it would work?" Ji-hoon considered the question. The files he had read described humans as creative and stubborn. They possessed an unusual ability to thrive in impossible situations. When trapped, they fought harder. When outnumbered, they used tactics their enemies never expected. But they were also unpredictable. Even their own leaders could not always control them. Individual humans often acted against orders if they believed they were right. They formed emotional attachments that clouded their judgment. They took unnecessary risks for abstract concepts like honor or revenge. "I don't know," Ji-hoon finally answered, "but I know we're running out of options." The debate continued for hours. Some species threatened to leave the council if humans were awakened. Others argued that extinction was preferable to releasing humanity back into the galaxy. The oldest members reminded everyone why the Great Pacification Wars had been fought in the first place. But Doyen kept showing them the numbers. System after system falling, species after species going extinct. The projected timeline for total collapse. Finally, a vote was called. Ji-hoon watched the results appear on the main display. The chamber held its breath. Green lights for yes, red lights for no. The count climbed higher and higher. The final result appeared. By a margin of just 3 votes, Protocol Omega was approved. Minseo stood slowly. Her face showed a mixture of fear and resignation. "Then I will make the arrangements. The sanctuary worlds will be contacted. The stasis facilities will begin revival procedures." She paused and looked around the chamber. "May the ancestors forgive us for what we are about to unleash." That night, Ji-hoon stood alone in his quarters and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vorthax swarm continued its advance. And somewhere else, deep beneath the ice of distant moons, machines were beginning to wake the humans from their long sleep. He wondered what they would think when they learned 2,000 years had passed. Would they be angry, confused? Would they even help the council that had imprisoned them? Ji-hoon had no answers. He only knew that the galaxy was about to change again. For better or worse, humanity was coming back. The final option had been chosen. There was no turning back now. The cold was the first thing Junho noticed. It seeped into his bones and made his muscles ache. He tried to open his eyes, but the lids felt heavy. His mouth tasted like metal. Strange sounds echoed around him, muffled and distant. "Subject is responsive," a voice said. "Heart rate increasing. Brain activity normal." Junho forced his eyes open. Bright lights blinded him for a moment. He blinked several times until shapes began to form. A curved ceiling. Medical equipment. Faces looking down at him. Not human faces. Memory returned in a rush. The war, the final battle. The choice they had been given. "Stasis or death, where am I?" Junho asked. His voice came out as a harsh whisper. A woman moved closer. She had pale skin and wore a medical uniform. Human. "You're in Sanctuary 7. The revival process is complete. Try to move slowly." Junho sat up carefully. His body felt strange, like it belonged to someone else. The medical bay stretched far into the distance. Hundreds of pods lined the walls. Some were opening. People were emerging, confused and disoriented. "How long?" Junho asked. The medical officer's name tag read Yunji. She hesitated before answering. 2,000 years, the number should have shocked him. Instead, Junho felt nothing. 2,000 years. Everyone he had known was dust. His world was gone. The only thing that remained was duty. "What's happening?" he asked. Before Yunji could answer, another figure approached. This one was definitely not human. She had blue skin and 4 arms. Her species name came to Junho from old memories. "One of the council races, Captain Junho," the alien said. "I am Diplomat Heejin. I need to brief you on the current situation." Junho stood on shaky legs. Around him, more humans were waking. Some were crying. Others sat in silence, processing the impossible truth. 2,000 years. Everything they had fought for, everyone they had loved, all gone. "I need to see my commanding officer," Junho said. "Colonel Bonsu is being revived in the military wing," Heejin replied. "But time is critical. The Galactic Council needs your help." Junho almost laughed. "The same council that put us in these boxes? That council needs our help?" "Yes." Hyejin did not look away from his gaze. We are facing extinction, all of us. If we do not stop the threat, there will be no galaxy left to argue about. Over the next hours, Junho learned about the Vorthak swarm. Hyejin showed him recordings of battles. Planets consumed, fleets destroyed, entire species wiped out. The enemy adapted to every weapon, evolved past every strategy. Why wake us? Junho asked. Your technology is clearly more advanced than what we had. Technology is not enough, Hyejin said quietly. The Vorthak learn from every encounter. They become immune to our weapons. They predict our tactics. We need something they cannot predict. We need human creativity. More soldiers gathered in the briefing room. They wore the same confused expressions. Some had been civilians. Others had been frontline troops. All had agreed to stasis rather than watch their species be destroyed. Colonel Bonsu arrived with a group of senior officers. He was a tall man with hard eyes. He listened to Hyejin's briefing without interruption. When she finished, he stood and faced the gathered humans. I know you're confused, Bonsu said. I know this situation is impossible to process. But right now we need to focus. There's an enemy that needs to be stopped. We can deal with our feelings later. Right now we do what we do best. We fight. Specialist Jiwon raised her hand. She had been a weapons engineer before stasis. What equipment do we have? Your original weapons and ships were preserved, Hyejin answered. The council felt they might be needed someday. Jiwon looked skeptical. 2,000-year-old weapons against modern technology. Your weapons were designed differently than ours, Hyejin explained. We build for efficiency and precision. You built for reliability and power. The Vorthak have adapted to our approach. Perhaps they will struggle with yours. Engineer Taeyang spoke up. Can we see the armory? The preservation facility stretched for miles underground. Weapons of every type filled massive warehouses. Tanks, fighters, warships all maintained in perfect condition. The humans walked through in silence, touching equipment they remembered from their previous lives. It's all here, Taeyang said with wonder. Everything we built. Lieutenant Sumin examined a rifle. It was heavy and crude compared to the energy weapons the council used, but it would work in any condition. Underwater, in vacuum, covered in mud. That was the human way. Build things that never broke. They want us to buy them time, someone said. That's why we're really here. They'll evacuate while we slow down the swarm. Bonsu nodded slowly. Probably. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to win. The other soldiers looked at each other. Win? Against an enemy that had defeated the combined might of the Galactic Council? They woke us for a reason, Bonsu continued. Not because we're expendable. Because we're dangerous. Because we fight differently than everyone else. The Council forgot what made us a threat. The Vorthak are about to learn. Training began immediately. The humans had to adapt to galactic technology, while teaching Council forces their own methods. It was not easy. The Council soldiers fought with precision and coordination. They followed complex battle plans created by advanced computers. Human tactics looked like chaos in comparison. Small units acting independently, soldiers making decisions without waiting for orders, plans that changed constantly based on immediate conditions. This is madness, one council observer said while watching human combat drills. There's no coordination, no structure. There's plenty of structure, Junho explained. You just can't see it. Every soldier knows the mission objective. We trust each other to do what's necessary to achieve it. We don't need orders for every action. But what if someone makes a wrong decision? Then we adapt. We cover for each other. We find another way. Junho smiled grimly. Your forces fight like a machine. Efficient but predictable. We fight like a living thing. Messy but adaptable. Weeks passed. More humans were revived. Engineers studied the Vorthak biology from captured samples. Medical teams analyzed their adaptation mechanisms. Tacticians reviewed every battle recording. Scientist Jinha made an important discovery. The Vorthak have a hive mind. They share information instantly across the entire swarm. That's why they adapt so quickly. That's also a weakness, Taeyang said. If they share everything, then confusion in one part affects the whole. Ideas began to form. Strategies that the council had never considered. Weapons that seemed primitive but might work for that exact reason. Tactics that relied on unpredictability rather than superiority. The first real test came sooner than expected. A council station in the Helios system was under attack. The defense fleet was losing. Evacuation had begun. We're not ready, Hyejin protested. Your forces have only trained for 3 weeks. We're ready enough, Bonsu replied. Besides, actual combat is the best training. Admiral Changmin commanded the human fleet from the bridge of a restored carrier. The ships looked ancient compared to council vessels. But they moved with purpose, cutting through space toward Helios. The Vorthak will expect a head-on assault, Changmin explained to his officers. That's what they've seen from every council force. We're going to do something different. Captain Minji reviewed the tactical display. The asteroids near Helios. We can use those. Exactly, Changmin agreed. We're not fighting a battle. We're setting a trap. The human fleet bypassed the station completely. Council forces watched in confusion as the humans moved toward the asteroid belt. What were they doing? Why weren't they defending the station? Trust them, Ji-hoon told the council observers. He had traveled with the fleet to document the operation. They see something we don't. The Vorthak swarm advanced on Helios Station. Millions of bioships moving in perfect coordination. They had crushed dozens of defensive positions exactly like this one. Nothing could stop them. Then the asteroids began to move. Human mining equipment had attached engines to hundreds of massive rocks. Now those rocks were accelerating toward the swarm. Not as weapons themselves, but as obstacles. Channels formed in space, guiding the Vorthak into narrow paths. Now, Changmin ordered, the human warships opened fire, not at the swarm itself, but at specific asteroids rigged with nuclear charges. The rocks exploded, creating fields of shrapnel moving at incredible speeds. The Vorthak flew directly into the debris. It was not elegant. It was not sophisticated, but it worked. The swarm's formations broke apart. Ships collided with each other. The hive mind struggled to process the chaos. This was not how battles were supposed to work. Human fighters swept through the confusion. Marine teams led by Sunwoo boarded damaged Vorthak ships, gathering samples and data. The fighting was brutal and close. Exactly the kind of combat humans excelled at. When the battle ended, Helios Station still stood. The swarm had been driven back for the first time in 5 years. Ji-hoon watched the human soldiers celebrate their victory. They had lost ships and people, but they had won. Against impossible odds, they had actually won. Hyejin stood beside him. What have we released? She asked quietly. Ji-hoon had no answer. He only knew that everything had changed. The humans were back, and they were not the same species that had been put into stasis. The victory at Helios changed everything. News spread across the galaxy within days. The unstoppable Vorthak swarm had been beaten. Not destroyed, but actually driven back. Species that had been preparing to flee suddenly found hope. But Commander Yuna of the Council Defense Fleet did not share that optimism. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the human fleet approach their next target. What she saw made no sense. Those are cargo vessels, she said to her tactical officer, and mining equipment. Why are they bringing mining equipment to a battle? The officer checked his displays. I don't know, Commander. The humans refused to share their battle plans. Yuna felt frustration building. The Council had placed her in charge of coordinating with human forces. So far, coordination meant watching the humans do whatever they wanted while she tried to keep Council ships out of their way. Captain Junho commanded one of the human carriers. Yuna had requested a meeting with him to discuss strategy. He had agreed, but when she arrived, she found him in a storage bay rather than his office. Captain, we need to coordinate our forces, Yuna said. The Vorthak are massing near the Kepler station. Intelligence suggests they're preparing a major assault. Junho nodded while inspecting a crate of explosives. We know. That's where we're headed. Then we should develop a joint battle plan. My fleet can provide covering fire while your forces, Commander Yuna. Junho interrupted gently. We appreciate the offer, but we work better alone. That's not how military operations function, Yuna protested. There needs to be coordination. Command structure. Shared intelligence. Your forces can defend Kepler Station, Junho suggested. We'll handle the swarm. Before Yuna could argue further, Junho moved on to inspect other equipment. She was left standing alone, feeling dismissed. Tactical Officer Daeho approached her later. He was human, one of the soldiers who had been helping translate between the two military cultures. Don't take it personally, Daeho said. Captain Junho isn't being rude. He's just focused on the mission. How can he be focused on the mission without proper planning? Yuna demanded. Daeho smiled slightly. Commander, can I ask you something? How do you prepare for battle? Standard procedure. Intelligence gathering, analysis of enemy strength and positions, development of tactical plans, assignment of forces to specific objectives, clear chain of command for— That's the difference, Deho interrupted. You plan for the battle you expect. We prepare for the battle we'll actually fight. That makes no sense. It does if you understand that battles never go according to plan. The Vorthak adapt. Situations change, so we train our people to think, not just follow orders. We give them objectives and trust them to figure out how to achieve them. Yuna shook her head. That's chaos. Maybe, Deho agreed. But chaos is hard to predict. And if the enemy can't predict you, they can't adapt to you. The human fleet reached the Kepler system 3 days later. The Vorthak swarm was already there. Millions of bioships orbiting the station in a massive sphere. They were waiting, learning the station's defensive patterns before attacking. Junho studied the tactical display. Marine Commander Sunwoo stood beside him, along with several other officers. They're expecting us to defend the station, Sunwoo observed. Then we won't, Junho replied. Instead of moving to protect Kepler, the human fleet scattered. Ships broke formation and headed in dozens of different directions, some toward asteroid fields, others toward the system's outer planets. A few appeared to be fleeing entirely. On the Council command ship, alarms rang. Yuna watched the human fleet's movements with growing horror. What are they doing? She demanded. They're abandoning the station. Her tactical officer looked equally confused. I don't understand, Commander. Their movements make no tactical sense. The Vorthak swarm noticed the human fleet's strange behavior. Part of the swarm broke off to pursue the scattered ships. The perfect sphere formation collapsed as bioships chased targets in multiple directions. That was when the trap began to spring. The human ships fleeing toward the asteroid field suddenly reversed course. As the pursuing Vorthak followed, the asteroids exploded. Not all of them. Just enough to create a dense cloud of debris that the swarm flew directly into. The ships heading toward the outer planets reached a gas giant and dove into the upper atmosphere. The Vorthak followed. Both fleets vanished into the swirling storms. Minutes later, the human ships emerged from the opposite side of the planet. The Vorthak ships did not. Something in the atmosphere had disrupted their organic technology. The ships that appeared to be fleeing the system suddenly turned and accelerated back toward Kepler at maximum speed. They were not fleeing. They were building velocity. Junho watched the timer count down. Everything depended on precise timing. Too early and the Vorthak would escape. Too late and the trap would fail. All ships report ready, Sunwoo said. Execute, Junho ordered. Throughout the system, human ships activated simultaneously. The ones in the asteroid field launched thousands of mining charges, each programmed to home in on Vorthak biosignatures. The ships near the gas giant deployed a weapon the Council had never seen before. Chemical bombs that reacted violently with the organic compounds in Vorthak hulls. The high-speed ships approaching Kepler were not attacking the station. They were ramming the swarm at relativistic speeds. Their crews had already evacuated in small pods. The empty ships struck the Vorthak formation like hammers. It was not elegant. Half the human ships were destroyed, but the swarm was broken. Science Officer Jinha studied the results from the Council observation post. What she saw fascinated her. They're not trying to be efficient, she explained to Yuna. They're trying to be unpredictable. Every attack uses completely different tactics. The Vorthak can't adapt because there's no pattern to learn. But they're taking massive casualties, Yuna protested. Yes, Jinha agreed. But they're also winning. And for humans, that's what matters. The next battle was different. This time the humans used biological warfare. Engineer Taiyang had developed a virus that attacked Vorthak reproductive systems. It spread through the swarm rapidly, carried by the hive mind's own communication network. The battle after that used acoustic weapons. Specialist Jinwoo discovered that certain frequencies disrupted Vorthak neural connections. The entire hive mind stuttered and froze while human forces attacked the helpless bioships. Every engagement introduced new tactics. Chemical weapons, psychological warfare, ancient strategies combined with modern technology in ways no one had considered. The Vorthak adapted to each weapon after it was used. But by then, the humans had already moved on to something else. Commander Seojin led a group of fighters in what he called a harassment campaign. His ships would attack Vorthak positions, do minimal damage and flee. The swarm would pursue. Then Seojin would lead them into ambushes, asteroid fields, or simply in circles until they were out of position. It's not about killing them, Seojin explained. It's about wasting their time and resources. Every hour they spend chasing us is an hour they're not attacking stations or consuming planets. Council observer Wu Jin documented everything. He had been assigned to write reports on human military operations. What he recorded disturbed him. The humans were winning. That should have been good news. But the way they won felt wrong. They used weapons the Council had banned centuries ago. They took risks that bordered on suicidal. They treated war not as a necessary evil, but as a problem to be solved through creativity. Worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying it. Wu Jin watched Sergeant Young-ho brief his squad before a boarding action. The sergeant was smiling, actually smiling as he described how they would cut through Vorthak bioships and plant explosives in their breeding chambers. These creatures consumed 17 species, Young-ho said. They thought they were the apex predators. Today we teach them they were wrong. The soldiers cheered. They were excited about going into combat. Wu Jin filed his report with growing concern. The humans were effective. Perhaps too effective. They had gone from uncertain allies to the galaxy's most dangerous military force in just months. Field Marshal Hyun-woo coordinated the overall campaign. He studied maps showing Vorthak positions across dozens of systems. Red markers indicated swarm concentrations. Blue markers showed human victories. The red was disappearing. They're in full retreat, Admiral Changmin said. For the first time in 5 years, the Vorthak are running. Then we pursue, Hyun-woo decided. Every nest, every breeding ground, every single concentration of swarm forces. We hunt them all down. The Council is suggesting we accept a ceasefire, Changmin mentioned carefully. They think the Vorthak could be contained now, pushed back to the outer rim and monitored. Hyun-woo looked at him coldly. The Council woke us to eliminate a threat. That's what we're going to do. You don't defeat an enemy like this by half measures. You destroy them completely so they can never threaten anyone again. Dr. Soyeon attended a council meeting where representatives discussed the human campaign. She listened to them praise human effectiveness while simultaneously expressing fear about human methods. They've saved us, one representative said. But at what cost? They're teaching our own forces that the old rules of war don't matter, that anything is acceptable if it leads to victory. They were always like this, Minseo reminded everyone. The Vorthak swarm had never known fear. For millions of years, they had consumed thousands of worlds across multiple galaxies. They were evolution's perfect predator. They adapted to every threat, overcame every obstacle, and grew stronger with each victory, until they met humanity. Captain Minji led her squadron through the debris field where a Vorthak nest had been destroyed. Her ships moved slowly, scanning for survivors. They found none. The organic structures that had housed millions of swarm creatures were now frozen husks drifting in space. Target eliminated, Minji reported, moving to the next coordinates. This was the third nest her squadron had destroyed in 2 weeks. Across the galaxy, similar operations were happening everywhere. The humans had divided into small, fast-moving groups. Each group hunted swarm concentrations independently. No central command. No rigid plans. Just clear objectives and trusted soldiers. The Vorthak tried to adapt. They learned to recognize human attack patterns. They modified their bioships to resist human weapons. They changed their breeding cycles to reproduce faster, but the humans changed faster. Specialist Jinwoo worked in a laboratory aboard the research vessel. He studied recordings of Vorthak communication signals, looking for new weaknesses to exploit. His latest discovery was promising. The hive mind uses a specific frequency range, he explained to the gathered officers. We've been disrupting it with acoustic weapons. But I found something better. We can inject false signals into their network. Commander Seojin leaned forward with interest. What kind of false signals? Anything we want. False target locations, fake danger warnings, orders that contradict each other. Jinwoo smiled. We can make them hear their own mind telling them lies. The weapon was deployed within days. Human ships began broadcasting corrupted signals toward swarm positions. The effects were immediate and devastating. Vorthak bioships turned on each other, responding to threats that did not exist. Their perfect coordination collapsed into chaos. When the swarm adapted and learned to filter out the false signals, the humans switched tactics again. This time they used biological warfare. Not the virus that engineer Taeyang had created before, but something new. A genetically modified parasite that infected Vorthak breeding chambers and prevented reproduction. The swarm evolved immunity within weeks, so the humans introduced chemical weapons that turned Vorthak organic hulls brittle and weak. When the swarm developed resistance to those, kinetic bombardments followed. Rocks accelerated to fraction of light speeds. Simple, primitive, impossible to adapt to because there was nothing to adapt against. Just mass and velocity. Field Marshal Hyunwoo studied the tactical maps with satisfaction. The red markers indicating swarm positions were disappearing rapidly. In 6 months, humanity had pushed the Vorthak back further than the Council had managed in 5 years. "We're winning," Admiral Changmin said. "The swarm's retreat is accelerating. They're abandoning their forward positions and falling back to the Void Nebula." "Good," Hyunwoo replied. "That's where we'll finish them." Council observer Wu Jin attended the strategy meeting. He listened to the human commanders discuss their final assault with growing unease. "The Void Nebula contains the largest concentration of Vorthak forces," Hyunwoo explained. "Possibly billions of bioships and their primary breeding complexes. If we destroy them there, the swarm is finished." "What about containment?" Wu Jin asked. "The Council has been discussing ways to isolate the remaining swarm rather than—" "No containment," Hyunwoo interrupted. "This ends completely, but surely there's value in studying them, understanding their biology. The scientific knowledge alone. Would you keep a sample of a plague that killed 17 species?" Sergeant Young-ho asked. "For science?" Wu Jin had no answer to that. The preparations for the final assault took weeks. Every human ship that could fly was recalled. Soldiers who had been resting were mobilized. Weapons that had been held in reserve were distributed. This would be the largest operation humanity had conducted since waking from stasis. Wing Commander Jae-hee prepared her fighter pilots. They practiced attack runs over and over. The Void Nebula was dangerous even without enemies. Dense gas clouds, radiation storms, and gravitational anomalies made navigation difficult. "The Vorthak chose this location because it's defensible," Jae-hee explained. "They think the environment will protect them. We're going to use that environment as a weapon." Demolitions expert Sung-hee worked with a team of engineers to prepare special bombs. These were not sophisticated weapons. They were simply massive amounts of antimatter in armored containers. When detonated near the nebula's gas clouds, they would trigger chain reactions that consumed everything for light years in every direction. "It's a big hammer," Sung-hee admitted. "But sometimes you need a big hammer." Dr. Soyeon raised objections at every opportunity. She argued that destroying the Vorthak completely was genocide, that containing them was more ethical, that humanity was setting a dangerous precedent. "They're intelligent creatures," Soyeon insisted. "They have a right to exist." "They consumed 17 species," Lieutenant Somin replied. "Do those species' rights not matter? The ones who can't speak anymore because they're extinct? 2 wrongs don't make a right. Maybe not. But 1 right can prevent future wrongs. If we leave any Vorthak alive, they'll adapt and return. Stronger, smarter, ready for us next time." Somin's voice was hard. "We finish this now so no one else has to fight them later." The moral debates continued, but the military preparations did not stop. The human fleet assembled at the edge of the Void Nebula, thousands of ships arranged in loose formations, not the tight coordinated patterns the Council forces used, just clusters of vessels ready to adapt to whatever they found. General Kiwan commanded the operation from the fleet carrier. He was old for a soldier, but stasis had preserved him. He had fought in the Great Pacification Wars, had seen humanity at its most desperate and most dangerous. He understood what was about to happen. "This is an extinction event," Kiwan said to his senior officers. "We are going to end an entire species today. I want everyone to understand that, to remember it. What we do here will define how the galaxy sees humanity for generations." "They attacked first," Changmin pointed out. "They gave no mercy to anyone they encountered." "True," Kiwan agreed. "But we're supposed to be better than that, aren't we?" "That's what the Council told us. That we were too violent, too brutal. They put us in stasis to protect the galaxy from us." He paused. "Now we're proving them right. So what do you want to do?" Hyunwoo asked. "Win," Kiwan said simply. "I don't like it. But I'll do it. Because the alternative is letting them survive and watching them consume more species. Sometimes there are no good choices. Only necessary ones." The attack began at dawn, though dawn meant nothing in the void of space. The human fleet entered the void nebula from multiple directions simultaneously. The Vorthak were waiting. Billions of bioships emerged from the gas clouds. The largest swarm concentration ever recorded, they had gathered here for their final stand. The nebula's environment gave them advantages. They knew its dangers. They had bred specialized creatures that could navigate its hazards, but the humans did not try to navigate. They simply destroyed. Jahi led her fighters in strafing runs through the nebula. They fired not at the swarm but at the gas clouds themselves, igniting them, creating firestorms that spread faster than the Vorthak could escape. Capital ships bombarded the breeding complexes with kinetic weapons. Rocks moving at incredible speeds punched through organic structures and shattered them. No elegant energy weapons, just brutal, overwhelming force. The Vorthak fought back desperately. Their bioships swarmed the human vessels, trying to overwhelm them with numbers. Some succeeded. Human ships exploded or were consumed. Soldiers died by the thousands, but the humans kept coming. Sung-hee's demolition teams penetrated deep into the nebula. They fought through swarm defenders to reach the primary breeding complexes. The structures were massive, organic cities that had taken centuries to grow. Sung-hee and her team planted antimatter charges throughout them. Charges set, she reported. Extraction in progress. Not all the teams made it out. Some were cut off by swarm forces. They detonated their explosives anyway, taking the breeding complexes and themselves with them. The battle lasted 3 days, the longest single engagement humanity had fought since waking. When it ended, the void nebula burned. Antimatter reactions consumed the gas clouds. The breeding complexes collapsed. The billions of Vorthak bioships were reduced to debris. Junho walked through the corridor of his damaged carrier. Medical teams treated the wounded. Soldiers sat in exhausted silence. Some cried. Others stared at nothing. They had won, but victory felt heavy. On the bridge, the tactical display showed the nebula. Where once there had been a massive concentration of swarm forces, now there was nothing, just expanding waves of destruction. Confirmed total elimination, Kiwan ordered. The scanning teams worked for hours. They searched every corner of the nebula, every asteroid, every gas cloud. Looking for any sign of surviving Vorthak, they found none. The swarm is extinct, the tactical officer reported. The words should have brought relief. Instead, they brought silence. Everyone understood what had been done. An entire species gone, not defeated or scattered, erased completely. The celebrations lasted for weeks. Across the galaxy, species that had been preparing for extinction now looked toward the future with hope. The Vorthak swarm, the terror that had consumed 17 civilizations, was gone. Humanity had done what seemed impossible. But on the council stations, the mood was different. Ji-hoon stood at the window of his quarters and watched human ships patrol the space outside. They moved with confidence now, like they owned the stars. In a way, they did. No force in the galaxy could match them. Everyone knew it. The council wants to meet with human leadership, Hana informed him. She had been promoted after the war. Now she coordinated communications between the council and human forces. What do they want to discuss? Ji-hoon asked. The future. What happens now that the war is over? Ji-hoon almost smiled, as if the answer was not obvious. The humans would not simply go back into stasis. They had proven their worth. Saved the galaxy. They would demand their place in it. The meeting took place in the Grand Council chamber, the same room where Protocol Omega had been approved months ago. Then the chamber had been filled with desperate representatives arguing about survival. Now it was filled with nervous politicians trying to figure out how to deal with their saviors. Ambassador Chae-young represented humanity. She was not a soldier like most of the awakened humans. She had been a diplomat before stasis, someone who understood politics and negotiation. The humans had chosen her specifically for this meeting. The council wishes to express its gratitude, Council Chairman Minho began. Humanity has saved us all. We are in your debt. We appreciate that, Chae-young replied smoothly. And now we need to discuss terms. The word terms made several representatives shift uncomfortably. They had hoped this would be a simple ceremony. Thanks and awards, perhaps a memorial for the human soldiers who died. Then everyone could go back to normal. But Chae-young had other ideas. Humanity has been locked away for 2,000 years, she said. We missed those centuries. Our species was denied the right to explore, expand, and develop. That ends now. What exactly are you proposing? Minho asked carefully. First, we want planets. At least 20 suitable worlds for colonization. Full sovereignty over those systems. Not council oversight. Not shared administration. They're ours. Several representatives started to object. Chae-Young held up her hand. Second, we want military autonomy. Human forces will remain independent. We'll cooperate with council operations, but we don't answer to council command. That's completely unreasonable, someone shouted. Military forces must be under civilian control. Your military forces can be, Chae-Young agreed. Ours won't be. We've seen what happens when we trust others to make decisions about our survival. Third, she continued, we want representation on the council, full member status, equal voice in all decisions. The chamber erupted. Representatives argued over each other. Some supported the demands. Others called them extortion. A few suggested the humans were becoming the very threat they had been imprisoned for. Minho called for order. When the chamber finally quieted, he spoke carefully. These demands are significant. The council will need time to consider them. Of course, Chae-Young said pleasantly. Take all the time you need. While you discuss, our ships will continue patrolling, protecting council space, securing the systems we've liberated from the Vorthak. She smiled. We're very good at occupying territory. The implied threat was clear. The humans were not asking permission. They were informing the council of what was going to happen. Minseo attended the private meeting of senior council members afterward. The mood was grim. They've outmaneuvered us, she said. We woke them to fight the Vorthak. Now they're too powerful to control. We could revoke their awakening authorization, someone suggested. Demand they return to stasis. With what leverage? Doyen asked. They have the strongest military in the galaxy. They could refuse, and we have no way to force them. We could unite the other species against them, another representative proposed. Show them that aggressive demands will not be tolerated. Like we united against the Vorthak? Minseo asked bitterly. That worked so well. Besides, many species support the humans. They see them as heroes who saved us all. The reality settled over the room like a cold weight. They had released humanity to save the galaxy. Now humanity was going to reshape it according to their own vision. Observer Ji-Yeon was assigned to monitor human colonies. The council wanted to know what humanity was planning. What kind of society they would build. Whether they would remain aggressive or settle into peaceful expansion. The first human colony was established on a planet they named New Earth. Ji-Yeon visited during the initial construction phase. What she found surprised her. The humans were not building military bases. They were building farms, schools, homes, families were moving in. Children played in newly planted fields. Soldiers who had fought the Vorthak now worked as teachers and farmers and engineers. You expected weapons factories? Junyo asked. He had retired from active military service and now served as the colony's administrator. Honestly, yes, Ji-Yeon admitted. We fight when we have to, Junho explained. But that's not all we are. We build, we create. We want the same things everyone wants. Safety for our families. A future for our children. The chance to live without fear. Ji-Yeon filed positive reports. The human colonies seemed peaceful, productive. Perhaps the fears were overblown. Perhaps humanity would integrate smoothly into galactic civilization. Then the incident at Taro Station happened. A council security force had attempted to board a human vessel for routine inspection. The humans refused. An argument escalated into a confrontation. Shots were fired. 3 council officers and 1 human were killed. The galaxy held its breath. General Kiwan issued a statement within hours. It was brief and direct. Any attempt to board human vessels without permission will be considered an act of war. Deadly force is authorized in self-defense. They can't make that declaration, Yejin protested at the emergency council session. All vessels in council space are subject to inspection. That's basic law. Then change the law, Chae-Young replied. Or start a war. Those are your options. Minho felt the weight of his position heavily. 2,000 years ago, his predecessors had faced a similar choice. Back then they chose war. Millions died. The council won, but barely. Now the situation was different. Humanity was stronger, more experienced. They had just destroyed the Vorthak swarm. If the council went to war with them, the outcome was not certain. We will discuss modifications to inspection protocols, Minho said carefully, to respect the sovereignty of all member species. Chae-Young smiled. I'm glad we could reach an understanding. Wu Jin watched the exchange with growing concern. The council was retreating, making concessions. Humanity was not conquering the galaxy through military force. They were doing it through implied threat. Everyone knew what would happen if they pushed too hard. Years passed. Human colonies grew. More planets were settled. Human ships became a common sight throughout Council space. They served as military escorts, peacekeeping forces. Sometimes they intervened in disputes between other species, always claiming neutrality but somehow always achieving outcomes that benefited human interests. Commander Ji-hoon retired from Council service. He had seen enough. On his last day, he met with Junho at a cafe on New Earth. You knew this would happen, Ji-hoon said. When we woke you, you knew you wouldn't go back to stasis. Of course, Junho agreed. We're not weapons you can store in a box and take out when needed. We're people. You gave us a second chance at life. Did you really think we'd give it up? The Council is afraid of you. They should be, Junho said bluntly. We're dangerous. We've always been dangerous. That's why you imprisoned us. That's why you woke us. You wanted our danger pointed at the Vorthak instead of at you. And now? Hunyo shrugged. Now we're part of the galaxy again. We have planets and families and futures. As long as no one threatens that, we're peaceful neighbors. But if someone does threaten us... He did not need to finish the sentence. Ji-hoon thought about the old human proverb Doyen had mentioned during the first council meeting. About sleeping giants. It seemed more relevant than ever. The galaxy had learned what humanity could do when awakened. The question was whether they had also learned the wisdom of not threatening them. A ceremony was held to honor the human soldiers who died fighting the Vorthak. Thousands of names were read aloud. Young men and women who woke from stasis and went immediately to war, who fought and bled and died for a galaxy that had imprisoned their species. Dr. Soyeon attended the ceremony. She had opposed the war's brutality, had argued for mercy toward the Vorthak. But even she had to admit that the soldiers being honored had been brave. They had done what was necessary, even if the methods troubled her. After the ceremony, she spoke with Sergeant Young-ho. He had survived the final battle at the Void Nebula, and now trained new recruits for the Human Defense Forces. Do you ever regret what we did? Soyeon asked. The Vorthak are extinct. We killed an entire species, every day, Young-ho admitted. But I'd do it again if I had to. They were going to kill everyone. We stopped them. Was it brutal? Yes. Was it necessary? Also yes. But where does it end? If we can justify extinction once, what stops us from doing it again?